Hello everyone and welcome to a really wonderful game from round 3 of this year's Jerba Masters Chess Festival. It is Vasyl Ivanchuk versus Aryan Tari. Vasyl coming off of 2 draws and now playing this game. And Tari did lose that one game to Hans Niemann that we've shown, but also he defeated Divya Deshmukh in the second round in the game that we haven't shown. So this is the game 3. Let's check it out and see why I'm showing it and why it's so impressive. So Vasyl with the white pieces opens with knight to f3. And for those of you who are maybe new to chess and are new to the the name and the legend behind the great Vasyl Ivanchuk, do check out the link in the description below. Features his immortal game against none other than Garry Kasparov from the famous Linares tournament, where he completely paralyzed the world champion, and he made his bishop pair absolutely useless. It's one of the most beautiful games you will ever see, so do check it out. Now let's continue this game. Knight f3, we have pawn to d5 by Aryan, d4, knight to f6, c4, and now pawn to e6. So through a bit of a different move order, we reach the queen's gambit declined, and knight to c3 and g3 are the top two moves here. But we have bishop to g5, going for the so-called traditional variation, d captures on c4, grabbing the pawn, and now pawn to e4. As black is no longer contesting the center, white can grab the full center. We have pawn to c5, knight to c3, and c captures on d4. And in many of these lines, especially in the Sicilian defense, when c captures on d4 is played, you will see knight captures on d4. But here in this particular setup, bishop to c5 is just incredibly annoying. As the knight is hanging, you already developed your bishop to g5, so you really don't feel like bringing it back to e3. You can't really put the knight on b3. You don't want to move the knight back to f3. So it would just be giving black a little bit too much. Black would already at least equalize. So instead, after c captures on d4, queen captures on d4 is the standard reply here. We have queen captures, knight captures, and now pawn to h6. The position has been reached before, although a6 is the move that was played here. Levon Aryan had it against Yanni Pomnishi, and he won the game. Nepo tried playing a6, but it didn't go that well against Levon. And also Dubov played it against Rajabov, but their game ended in a draw. But here we have pawn to h6 by Tari, and it is now, as of move 8 already, that we have a completely new game. So okay, bishop to h4, we have pawn to a6 now, and the bishop captures on c4, grabbing back the pawn. We have pawn to b5, attacking the bishop back to e2, and now knight b to d7. We have pawn to f3, strengthening the e4 pawn, and now knight to e5. The knight is very strong here on a nice central square. There's no d pawn. If you want to advance the pawn to f4, then you weaken the e4 pawn. So all in all, the knight is very strong on e5, and this knight will come to h5, maybe to f4. So it's going to be very tricky. We have bishop back to f2 by Vasyl, and now bishop to b4, developing and pinning that knight. We have castles, and here the position is sort of equalish, and you should continue either with something like g5 or just castles. But in the game, a crucial error, a crucial positional error has been made. Bishop to d7 was played by Tari, and there is something monumentally wrong with bishop to d7, and it's very hard to spot, but Vasyl spotted it, so maybe you can spot it as well. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the absolute strongest move here for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on punishing black's play already on move 14. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to a4. And to understand why pawn to a4 is so strong, I will just show you what happens if instead of bishop to d7 you castle. Now, probably Vasyl calculated this, but also he could just have a very, very strong foresight. So maybe even he played it without calculating it. But the point is that, let's say you castled here. Why doesn't a4 work now with the bishop on c8? Even though you're attacking all of these pieces are attacking the b b5 pawn. Well, the point is now you can play b captures on a4, and after knight captures on a4, you can play a5. And now your pawn is very safe at defending the bishop here. And if knight to b6, attacking the rook, rook b8 attacks the knight, and now if knight back to c2, attacking the bishop and defending the knight, now you can bring the bishop back. And of course, now if rook captures on a5, there's this very nice bishop to c7 move, attacking the knight. If you move the knight, you're going to lose the rook, and also you cannot defend with rook to a6 because the bishop on c8 is defending the a6 square. You cannot play rook to b8 or b5 to defend because then there's bishop to a6 again, with a winning idea for black. So that's the reason why the bishop is strong on c8 but not on d7. However, Tari played bishop to d7 and Vasyl immediately went after it. Now he played pawn to a4, and the same idea no longer applies because you really need that bishop on c8 to be controlling the this diagonal. And Tari cannot afford to go into that. So instead he played bishop captures on c3, and now b captures on c3. B captures on a4, and now bishop to g3 attacking the knight here. So knight to c6, and here rook captures on a4. We have knight captures on d4 and rook captures on d4. You also of course want to improve your pawn structure, but the rook is hanging, so you have to capture with the rook. And now Tari castled. It's interesting that castles is the strongest move recommended by the engine, but it's still insufficient to survive the game, because after castles, pause the video for a second time and try to find the absolute top way to continue the game while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on continuing this positional masterpiece. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to d6. If you're wondering why rook to d6, well, the point is if you play e5, you attack the knight and you want the knight to move to win the bishop, the knight can just come to d5. And then you attack the knight again to win the bishop, but then the knight comes to c3 and attacks the bishop, which will come with check. So capturing on d7 will result merely in a trade, and a bad one for white at that. So instead, after this castles, we have rook to d6. Now this is precise. Now pawn to e5 chases away the knight and wins the piece on d7. So bishop to c8. Again, you cannot go for anything else. Bishop, interestingly, again comes to c8, which was the original square the bishop never should have left. We have rook to a1, putting pressure on the pawn here. Now it's attacked 3 times, and while you could defend it with pawn to a5, of course Tari knows that this pawn cannot be saved in the long run. He goes rook to b8. He prefers activity over this a pawn, but Vasyl doesn't go for it. You could capture it, but let's say you capture and everything gets traded off. Let's say rook captures on d6. Now rook b to c8 goes after the pawn. Rook a3 defends the pawn, and now rook to c4 stops further advancement of the pawn. You're going to double up on the c file next, and with both of your rooks on light squares, Vasyl having a dark square bishop, it's going to be very hard to kick those rooks away and to actually start advancing your passed pawn. So instead, pawn to c4. If the pawn will be captured, Vasyl wants the pawn to be already on a light square, nicely defended by the bishop. So okay, rook to b2 goes after the bishop, bishop to f1, nicely tucking in the bishop for later use. Bishop to b7, interestingly, again, the bishop moves from the c8 square, and now look at this, rook a to d1, rook to b3, and now pawn to c5. The pawn is now coming to c6, so rook to c3, Tari stops it, but now rook to b6, attacking the bishop, and again, look at this, the bishop returns to the starting square, bishop to c8. So Tari is trying to move it, but it just has nowhere to go. With the pawns on e6 and a6, this bishop is just, well, it's hard, you know, I don't want to insult a chess piece or anything, but that is one bad bishop. So here, pawn to c6, and now pawn to a5. He advances the pawn, maybe even frees up the a6 square for the bishop, you know, in some, you know, after times, and he's hoping for pawn to c7. But if pawn to c7, then you can actually play knight to, not knight to d7, you can actually play knight to e8. You will put pressure on the pawn, and now you will have to defend it. So there's no need to rush it. Bishop to e5 first. Put pressure on the knight, puts pressure on the rook here. Rook to c2, and now bishop to d3, kicking away the rook from the c file. Rook to a2, and now again bishop to c4, going after the rook. Again, just to give you an example, if pawn to c7, now knight to d7 could come with an attack on the rook and the bishop, and okay, you can bring the rook back because it's defended by the bishop, but still, it's unnecessary, and the Vasyl wants to keep things simple. Bishop to c4, rook to a4 attacks the bishop, and now finally bishop to b5, and this is all the preparation that was needed in order to advance the pawn to c7, as now the bishop will be covering the d7 square. And also rook to b4 is impossible due to bishop d6 with the skewer on both of the rooks. So after bishop b5, rook to a2 was played, and now pawn to c7, and there is zero, zero that Tari could actually do to defend against rook to d8. He tried king to h7, but Vasyl just played rook to d8, and he was in this position on move 33 that Aryan Tari resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Absolute positional masterclass by Vasyl Ivanchuk, the legend, just exploiting that bishop to d7 move. And you can see how it's a really, really bad bishop. There's no way to develop it. You really want to do it, but as soon as he played that bishop to d7, a4, and it was all Vasyl, from that point on. And okay, there's nothing. If you try something like rook to j8, because if you capture, of course, white gets a queen into the game. Then comes rook b8, attacks the bishop. You cannot defend it. If you move it, then you just trade here and then promote the pawn to a queen. Nothing. If you bring the king back to defend the rook again, rook b8, there's nothing you can do here. There's really nothing. Even with the bishop controlling these squares, even the knight cannot come to help, so it's completely hopeless. Yeah, brilliant game by Vasyl. That's why I've shown it. I really loved that whole, light square bishop useless business, and the Vasyl breaking through with that pawn to a4 move. Hope you guys enjoyed it as well. And like I said, if you're new to chess, if you haven't seen Ivanchuk's immortal game against Garry Kasparov, first link in the description below, it will definitely blow your mind, as it definitely blew Kasparov's mind. So yeah, once again, hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank David Gasparian, Jeffrey Menser, Kevin Hawkins, Daniel Heist, and Matthew Witten for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.